Hello there, good evening ladies and gentlemen, this is Al24 News. I'm Abdurrahim Kashour and to the headlines. Diplomatic efforts to defuse the tension around Ukraine continued on Tuesday with French President Emmanuel Macron presence in Kiev a day after meeting Russian leader in Moscow. US and Germany struggled to present a united front on Nord Stream 2 as Biden pledges to bring an end to pipeline if Russia invades Ukraine, but Scholz dodges questions. Hong Kong will establish its tightest social distancing rules since the start of the pandemic to curb its largest coronavirus outbreak so far, as a wave of Omicron cases has raised questions about how long the city can continue its strict COVID control policies. Speechmaking of election campaigns kicked off in Philippines on Tuesday ahead of a vote on May to choose a successor to President Rodrigo Duterte, who is limited to single term by law. Hello again and welcome to Al24 World News. The United States has approved a possible $100 million sale of equipment and services to Taiwan to sustain, maintain and improve the Patriot missile defense system used by self-ruled island claimed by China.
According to a statement released by the Defense Department, the United States has approved the possible sale to Taiwan of military equipment and services, including engineering services to support the Patriot missile defense system for an estimated cost of $100 million. The statement from the U.S. Defense Security Cooperation Agency said it had delivered the required certification notifying Congress following State Department approval for the sale, which was requested by Taiwan's embassy in Washington. The Defense Security Cooperation Agency said that the Patriot air defense system would help improve the security of the recipient and assist in maintaining political stability, military balance, economic and progress in the region. This proposed sale serves U.S. national economic and security interests by supporting the recipient's continuing efforts to modernize its armed forces and to maintain a credible defensive capability. Taiwan's foreign ministry also said it highly welcomed the decision.
In the face of China's continued military expansion and provocative actions, our country will maintain its national security with a solid defense and continue to deepen the close security partnership between Taiwan and the United States.
The U.S. officially follows the One China policy and recognizes Taiwan as part of China. However, the U.S. is also committed to ensuring Taiwan can defend itself.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will begin a series of meetings with Indo-Pacific allies. Blinken will visit Australia, Fiji and Hawaii for 6 days of discussion intended at promoting peace. The visit coincides with North Korea's successful test of a long-range ballistic missile capable of impacting Guam on January 31st, which analysts describe as the most important test of its missile capabilities in 5 years. In the tense standoff between Russia and Ukraine, French President Emmanuel Macron met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in continuation of Europe's diplomatic efforts to defuse potential conflict in the region. And just after this meeting, the French president headed toward the other side, which means Ukraine. More with Nabil Khazini.
In another page of the diplomatic efforts to ease tension in Ukraine, the French President Emmanuel Macron headed to Russia to meet with his Russian counterpart, Vladimir Putin.
Very good.
They met, exchanged greetings, but sat distance due to COVID-related protocols. Both couldn't also get closer in a common point on the matter they gathered for. After 5 hours of negotiations, Macron warned that the two sides needed to work quickly to avoid the risk of an escalation.
President
Putin has assured me of his willingness to engage in this logic and of his desire to maintain these balances of initiative, and in particular with regard to the stability and territorial integrity of Ukraine. The next few days will be decisive and will obviously require deep discussion that we will pursue together.
During the 5 hours of negotiations, Putin didn't miss the chance to show his country's power, saying that there will be no winner if the West drives itself into a conflict against its will.
Of course, the potential of this joint organization of NATO and Russia is incomparable. We understand this. But we also understand that Russia is one of the leading nuclear powers. And in some components, such as our modernity, our up-to-date technology, we're even ahead of many. There will be no winners, and you will find yourself drawn into this conflict against your will.
Macron, who has pushed his diplomatic credentials as he eyes possible re-election in 2 months' time, continued his journey and landed in Kiev. Welcomed by Volodymyr Zelensky, Macron held talks with the Ukrainian president and affirmed getting reassurances from Putin that there would be no further escalation of tensions.
Vladimir Putin told me he wouldn't cause an escalation. I noted this morning his confirmation of the commitment. There will be no fixed base or deployment of sensitive equipment in Belarus.
Macron said he plans to brief Putin on the result of the discussions with Zelensky in a phone call. The French president is set to meet soon with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz to discuss the efforts of their countries to ease tension in Ukraine.
Josep Borrell, the EU's foreign policy leader, has raised the alarm about a possible escalation of tensions between Russia over Ukraine. As Francis Macron met with Putin, Russia President, European foreign policy leader, warns that the danger level reached its extreme spot since the Cold War. Islam Sidon was followed.
EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has warned that Europe is facing its most significant security danger since the Cold War, while still hoping for a diplomatic solution to the Ukraine crisis.
Nobody masses 104,000 soldiers heavily armed in the border of a country at the same time that you state about the independence of this country in a way that certainly represents a strong threat. 140,000 troops massed in the border is not to go to have tea. So we have to increase our efforts in order to avoid a big risk.
Officials from the US-EU Energy Council met for the first time in 4 years to address an urgent, short-term goal strengthening natural gas supply in the face of a Russian threat to invade Ukraine. During the joint news conference in Washington, the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Borrell have also said they shared a strong concern about the situation on the ex-Soviet states' borders.
This is not alarmism. This is simply the facts. We have to deal with the facts. We have to deal with the facts in the context of history, and we have to deal with the facts in making sure that we are fully prepared. And the facts are, as Joseph said, that we've seen over the last few months, a massing of Russian forces on Ukraine's borders. That's not happening in a vacuum. It's happening in the context of what Russia already did in 2014. We don't believe that Mr. President Putin has made a decision, but he has put in place the capacity, should he so decide, to act very quickly against Ukraine and in ways that would have terrible consequences for Ukraine, for Russia, but consequences also for all of us.
The U.S. is demanding broad security guarantees, including a commitment that Ukraine would never be admitted to NATO. The U.S., on the other hand, has dismissed such suggestions, saying that whether or not Ukraine joins NATO is a matter for Ukraine and NATO.
The United States and Germany are working in lockstep to prevent Russian aggression in Europe. U.S. President Joe Biden stated this statement as he met with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz at the White House.
Amid growing tensions in Eastern Europe, Scholz held talks with Biden in Washington, for the first time seeking to reassure that his country stands alongside the United States and other NATO partners against any Russian aggression. The U.S. has warned that the pipeline could make Germany overly reliant on Russia for energy. Biden said the U.S. will not allow the pipeline to pump gas if Russia invades Ukraine.
If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
Scholz has faced scrutiny over the pipeline, which bypasses Ukraine transit infrastructure to deliver Russian gas directly to Germany. The pipeline has been built, but it is not yet operational. Scholz said it is important that the US and Europe speak with one voice, calling Russia's posture towards Ukraine a serious threat to European security.
As I already said, we are acting together. We are absolutely united, and we will not taking different steps. We will do the same steps, and they will be very, very hard to Russia, and they should understand.
Europe depends heavily on Russian energy exports, and weeks of ongoing tensions along the Russian-Ukraine border have fueled fears that Moscow could cut European nations off from critical supplies. Germany has taken a less forceful approach to Russia than some of its Western allies, refusing to send weapons to the Ukrainian army. The two leaders were also expected to discuss the coronavirus pandemic, climate change, and economic and security issues, the White House said ahead of Monday's meeting.
For the second time in a month, Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock visited Kiev amid tension with Russia, though diplomatic sources stated that her meeting with President Zelensky has been cancelled. Miriam Zian.
German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock paid her second visit to Ukraine in just 3 weeks on Monday, amid concerns of a Russian invasion. After meeting with her Ukrainian counterpart Dmytro Kuleba, Baerbock held a press conference. She stated at the conference that Berlin is willing to face a hefty economic price. She also stated that Germany and its partners have planned a series of strong measures against Moscow that would be employed if Ukraine crisis intensifies.
There is always diplomatic readiness for serious dialogue with Russia, but it is absolutely clear that there would be consequences and harshness if it led aggression on Ukraine.
Her remarks follow Economy Minister Robert Habeck's plea for Germany to lessen its reliance on Russian natural gas as tensions over the Ukraine crisis remain high. Annalena Baerbock was scheduled to meet with Ukrainian president, however the appointment was cancelled and another one was rescheduled with German Prime Minister. The topic of arms exports is likely to be high on the agenda for the discussions.
To a different matter now, Hong Kong will introduce its tightest social distancing rules since the start of the pandemic to curb the largest coronavirus outbreak so far, as a wave of Omicron cases has raised questions about how long the city can continue its strict COVID control policies. Osama Yadi has more to tell.
Hong Kong is extending gathering limits to private premises for the first time in an attempt to keep residents from socializing, as it fights an unprecedented coronavirus outbreak spurred by Omicron. The city will also limit public gatherings to 2 people, down from 4 currently, and expand the list of venues included in its vaccine mandate to shopping malls, food markets, and hair salons.
And then the fourth measure is to tighten the social gathering ban. The cap of a gathering is 4 persons. Today, we're amending it to 2 persons.
Authorities are turning to increasingly strict measures to try and tame a worsening outbreak that's pushed the healthcare system to the brink. Hong Kong is set to report a record of more than 620 coronavirus cases, according to local media. The rapid spread of the Omicron variant in the face of some of the world's toughest measures to root out the virus shows the difficulty of maintaining a strategy that aims to totally eliminate the spread of the virus.
It was the case some time before, and now given this severe epidemic, I hope the public will accept that we have to go back to the stringent level.
With hundreds of people testing positive each day, the city's meticulous contact tracing and isolation measures have come under severe strain, with long lineups for testing and a constantly shifting approach to quarantine facilities.
The Southeast Asian country is planning to fully reopen its borders from the 1st of March. Malaysia will ease restrictions that have been in place for 2 years since the pandemic first hit in 2020. Mohammed Azmin Ali, the country's senior minister, said that the decision is supported by most members of the National Council, starting that the border reopening is expected to have a positive impact on Malaysia's trade, industrial, and tourism activities. Hundreds of people blocked streets outside New Zealand's parliament today, inspired by rallies in Ottawa, Canada, to protest vaccine requirements and pandemic restrictions. The protesters, who were mostly not wearing masks, and waving signs that read freedom, claimed they would camp outside Parliament until the coronavirus limitations were abolished.
I'm pro-vaccine. Yeah. The vaccine is a really good thing, but we should be able to decide if we want to have it or not.
It's all about freedom of choice and being, allowed to govern our own bodies rather than being told.
Nancy Pelosi leads lawmakers in a moment of silence on the Capitol steps to mark 900,000 U.S. COVID deaths. The legislature gathered on the Capitol steps to pay tribute to more than 900,000 Americans who have perished for COVID-19 since the start of this pandemic. Wading through a crowd of supporters, Vice President Lani Roberto moved carefully as a group of teens started to gather around her, lifting their phones cameras ready to take selfies. The presidential candidate obliged her mask-wearing fans to keep their distance because of COVID-19 restrictions. The Philippine presidential election campaign has begun with candidates led by the pro-democracy incumbent vice president. The official 3-month election campaign for national post opened under a tough anti-virus restriction. Islam Seed on what follow.
Campaigning for the Philippines presidential election began on Tuesday, with a slate of candidates led by the country's pro-democracy current vice president, all promising to help a country racked by poverty, widening disparities, and decades-long insurgencies. The official 3-month election campaign for national positions, including the president's separately elected vice president, as well as half of the 24-seat Senate, began under strict antivirus restrictions. Over 67 million Filipinos have registered to vote, with approximately 1.7 million of them working abroad. Pre-election polls show Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., leading by a considerable margin, alarmed proponents of human rights and democracy, notably Vice President Leni Robredo, who narrowly defeated Marcos Jr. in the 2016 vice presidential election. Human rights activists say the 76-year-old Duterte would go to great lengths to ensure friendly successor to help Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. face potential lawsuits when he steps down on June 30th following his bloody anti-drugs crackdown, while his daughter has chosen to run for vice president and has emerged as a major candidate.
Fresh protesters have erupted again in Sudanese capital, Khartoum, after the population has insisted on its refusal of the military ruling in the country. Military and security forces face the civil anti-coup mobilization in the city with the cruel clashes and tear gas, which is worsening the political and security scenes in Sudan. Malian Prime Minister Choguel Maïga accused France on Monday of having worked to partition his country through its military commitment in a new virulent charge in front of diplomatics stationed in Bamako. Sama Yadi on what follow.
Malian Prime Minister Choguel Kokala Maïga accused France on Monday of having worked to partition his country through its military commitment. In an interview with Andalo Agency, the Prime Minister accused France of influencing decisions of the Economic Community of West African States bloc against Mali and the developments that led to Mali's enhanced collaboration with Russia.
To present ourselves as a pariah with the unacknowledged short-term objective of asphyxiating the economy in order to achieve, on behalf of who we know and by proxy, the destabilization and overthrow of the institutions of the transition.
Maïga acknowledged the French military intervention in 2013 in his country purportedly curbed the militant groups who had captured the desert north. However, the terrorists were given a second chance to regroup and return to force in 2014, even through the presence of the foreign military forces.
The current authorities also remember the ban made in 2013 by the French authorities on the Malian army.
The Malian authorities also accused France of colluding with the Economic Community of West African States against the sovereignty of the territory. Tensions have been mounting between France and its former colony after Mali expelled its French envoy 2 weeks ago over what the country described as hostile and outrageous comments by the former colonial power.
In Libya, fears of the possibility of a new power struggle have increased after the parliament decided to name a new prime minister to head the transitional government this week. Two candidates, former Interim Minister Fathi Bashagha and Minister Khalid Al-Baybas, presented their plans and submitted their bids to replace Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Al-Dubeiba. This latter has repeatedly said that and his government will remain in power until real elections take place. But some legislators have argued that this mandate ended up on December 24, 2021. North Korea has denied allegations if it carried out a series of cryptocurrency thefts and cyber attacks on other countries, calling them a creation by the United States. It's also denounced that the U.S. as hacking empire and country of intelligence theft. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is demanding an end to a protest by hundreds of truckers that has paralyzed the capital, and local authorities call for a federal support. Miriam Zian has more to explain.
The so-called Freedom Convoy and their supporters began arriving in Ottawa late in January to denounce an order requiring truckers to be fully vaccinated against COVID-19 to cross Canada's land border with the U.S. According to the Canadian Anti-Hate Network nonprofit group, the protests were organized by famous far-right figures who have adopted Islamophobic, anti-Semitic, and other hateful views. Since then, protesters have demonstrated against COVID-19 restrictions, bringing Ottawa to a standstill for more than a week. During an emergency debate in the House of Commons, Justin Trudeau said these demonstrations have to stop, adding that this pandemic was not easy for everyone.
Yesterday, the City of Ottawa declared a state of emergency. We're convening a table with the relevant federal and municipal partners to further strengthen our response. The federal government will be there with whatever resources the province and the city need in this situation.
Trudeau pledged federal government support.
Because our democracy is working. Just a short time ago, we had an election in this country where we asked Canadians how they wanted to keep fighting this pandemic. And their answer was clear. Canadians chose vaccines. They chose science.
His comments came after Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson urged the federal government to send an additional 1,800 police officers and appoint a mediator to work with protesters to end the siege that has infuriated local residents. Convoy participants have honked their horns incessantly for several days, blocked residential streets, set off fireworks late at night, harassed local residents, and disrupted daily life in the center of Ottawa. Protest organizers said activists were willing to engage with the government to find a way out for the crisis, but insisted that restrictions should be eased. With protesters outnumbering police in the capital's center blocked, police have come under fire for the extended crisis.
Growing challenges in Mali are forcing Germany's military-considered future of operation in West African states. There are around 1,200 German personnel deployed in Mali and West African states. However, the European power is still skeptical about continuing the mission in Mali. Osama Yadi has more to tell.
Germany is the latest European country to question its military deployment in Mali. This comes after Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock skept whether the conditions for a successful mission in Mali are still in place. There are around 1,300 German military personnel involved in the European Union training mission in Mali and the UN's MINUSMA mission. They're part of the multinational counter-terrorism and peacekeeping mission in the country that has been in progress for 9 years. Eberhard Zorn, the Inspector General of the German Army Forces, also expressed concerns over the continued viability of the mission. Zorn also highlighted growing military threats and political instability in the West African state.
We have a government that we understand does not have democratic legitimacy. That election is in 5 years is an intolerable state of affairs for us. There can be no business as usual.
Recently, the Malian military government announced that they no longer intend to organize elections in February, suggesting instead they will be held in 5 years' time. The announcement prompted sharp reaction from the spokesperson of the Green Party, which is a party of the governing coalition in Germany, who repeated that the return of the constitutional order is a precondition for the international community's engagement in Mali. Tension between Mali's military junta and the former colonial power France has led to the expulsion of the French ambassador. The military leadership also called for the immediate withdrawal of Danish forces in January. They were to join the fight against Islamist insurgents in the Sahel region.
More international news in this roundup by our own reporter Islam Sida.
According to a government forest official, Kenya's Aberdan National Park has been hit by a massive blaze for 2 days. Firefighters extinguished the fire after burning many hectares of wilderness. The fire erupted on Saturday, and dozens of forest rangers, firefighters, and volunteers battled to keep it from spreading. According to the United Nations World Food Programme, drought has left an estimated 13 million people in the Horn of Africa facing extreme famine. People in Somalia, Ethiopia, and Kenya are experiencing the driest circumstances since 1981, according to the UN, which is urging for quick aid to avoid a serious humanitarian crisis. Boris Johnson has been urged by the British legislators to apologize to Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition Labour Party, after he was confronted by a mob of irate demonstrators in an incident that some claim was sparked by the Prime Minister's remarks. Johnson accused Starmer of failing to charge Jimmy Savile, one of the UK's most prominent sex offenders, during his time as Director of Public Prosecutions in the House of Commons last week. Due to a lack of quorum, the Iraqi parliament postponed the voting of a new president till further notice yesterday. Only 58 members out of 329 attended yesterday's session, according to the Iraqi House of Representatives media office. The Palestinian Ministry of Health said on Tuesday that Zionist security forces killed 3 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank city of Nablus, eliciting criticism from the Palestinian Authority. According to eyewitnesses, Zionist special forces raided the Al-Makfi neighborhood of Nablus and opened fire on a Palestinian car. As the remains of the 3 were taken out of Rafidia Hospital in Nablus, hundreds of Palestinians thronged the streets.
Today, the Minister of Energy and Mines, Mr. Mohamed Al-Kab, met via video conferencing with his counterpart, the Nigerian Minister of State of Petroleum Resources, Mr. Timbre Silva, with the CEO and Director General of Sonatrach. During this meeting, the 2 ministers discussed relations of cooperation and partnership between the 2 countries in these fields of energy, which were described as a very good, and talk about enhancing them. On this occasion, the 2 ministers also discussed Algeria-Niger-Nigeria gas pipeline project. Now for another international news roundup, but this time within the economic sector precisely. That's for this report.
Spirit Airlines and Frontier Group Holdings have agreed a $2.9 billion cash and stock merger deal. The deal that would create the 5th largest airline in the United States, making Spirit Airlines stock soar on Wall Street. The combined airline is expected to offer more than 1,000 daily flights to over 145 destinations in 19 countries across its networks. As a result of higher oil and gas prices and refining margins and stronger trading results, energy giant British Petroleum saw its profit surge in the last quarters of 2021. The profit surge will help the energy giant to accelerate the greenings of the company, while relieving its highest annual profits for 8 years. House prices in the United Kingdom hit a record high last month. The index compiled by Halifax showed average prices were 9.7% or £24,500, up over 12 months to the end of January. The report warned that barriers to ownership, especially among young people, will become more acute in the coming months. After its Pakistani partner expressed support for the people in dispute region of Kashmir, calls to boycott Hyundai rose in Pakistan. The South Korean car maker Hyundai Motor expressed its deepest regrets for any offense caused to Indians by the unauthorized tweets from the account of its Pakistani partner that expressed solidarity for the people of disputed Kashmir.
Sport now. Senegal's football team arrived home a day after winning the African Cup of Nations to hundreds of thousands of thrilled and chanting fans in the capital, Dakar.
The long-awaited cup has finally made its first trip to Senegal. The trophy was lifted by Kalidou Koulibaly and the coach Aliou Cissé, along with the president Macky Sall, who declared Monday a public holiday to allow celebrations to continue.
Here you have reached the height to Africa, thanks to your fighting spirit. Because of your talent, your commitment, you have given us the pride and honor that is the mark of great people.
Outside the airport, there were thousands who gathered to welcome their champions. Chanting, screaming, celebrating their first African Cup of Nations trophy, a well-deserved one.
We're here to celebrate this trophy. We're proud of our players. We trust them. We're happy. It's been 57 years since we first took part, and we have just won an African Cup of Nations. Thank you. We're happy. We're happy with the Senegal. We're proud to be Senegalese, proud of this republic. We're going to win more trophies, inshallah.
The win followed 2 defeats in 2002 and the last one against Algeria in 2019. Now, the Senegalese people, along with their heroes, want more joy to continue next month, when they will meet again with Egypt, but this time for the African qualifiers playoffs for the World Cup, Qatar 2022.
I'm coming back because the fans love me and because the club loves me as well. For me, this is the most important thing in football. These words are not mine, but rather Islam Slimani ones. The Algerian striker is still rolling in Europe. Let's see this.
Paulinho! Estou de volta a casa.
Coming back because the fans love me and because the club loves me. For me, it's the most important thing in football. I miss Sporting, fans and El Valadi Stadium, so it was a very simple decision. It's great to be back home. It was with this jersey that I was the happiest. Sporting is my home. I feel good and I'm happy here. Football is like that. When you leave good memories, it's like that. Fans love me, and I love Sporting, and fans too.
Islam Slimani, another example of the hard work and dedication. To this end, ladies and gentlemen, let's have check again for our main stories. Diplomatic efforts to defuse the tension around Ukraine continued on Tuesday with French President Emmanuel Macron's presence in Kiev a day after meeting the Russian leader in Moscow. US and Germany struggle to present united front on Nord Stream 2 as Biden plans to bring an end to pipeline if Russia invades Ukraine, but Scholz dodges questions. Hong Kong will institute its tightest social distancing rules since the start of the pandemic to curb its largest coronavirus outbreak so far, as a wave of Omicron cases has raised questions about how long the city can continue its strict COVID control policies. Peacemaking of election campaigns kicked off in Philippines on Tuesday ahead of vote on May to choose successor to President Rodrigo Duterte, who is limited to a single term by law. That's all what we have got for now. Thank you so much for being with us. See you tomorrow and have a blessed evening.